Welcome to the Room of Lives. I'm your host, Neil. In this episode, I speak to a university audience and take questions about my experiences at my first 10-day silent meditation retreat in 2017 in remote Texas. I begin with some background on my personal spiritual journey that led to this retreat. I describe the setting and structure of the retreat, the kinds of people I found there, and the meditation method. Then I share my experience, physical and mental, about hitting bottom and then finding a scratched message on a wooden bench that helped me start climbing back up. I'll start. So my name is Abranil, or as people here usually know me, Neil. I am fifth year physics grad student, and this summer I went to a 10-day meditation retreat, and that's what I'm going to tell you about. Benam here also went to the retreat with me, and that's where we got to know each other. And one of the reasons I asked him to be in this room is the kind of experience that you have in a retreat like this is very subjective. It depends on your past experiences and what your expectations are of a retreat like this. So the lessons that you learn or not learn in a retreat such as this depends entirely on your personality. And so I didn't want any of you to leave this room thinking that the kind of story that I'm going to tell you is the only kind that's possible, or will set up your expectations in any such way. So I wanted at least a couple more voices. I think there's another friend of mine who also went to the retreat who was supposed to turn up, but she doesn't go to UT, so she might take some time finding this room. But we're 5 minutes past, so I'll start. Anyway, I wanted to give a little spiel about what the Malta seminar is about, but most faces I already know, so I'm just going to skip this. I assume that wherever we found this information, you also found the information to subscribe to notifications. That's how I have spread my tentacles. So, so I'll skip that. At the very beginning, I want to give you, hey, Rustam, okay, second person who went to the retreat. Okay. So I just want to give you some background, my personal background, and set up, hopefully explain the motivation for why I went to a retreat like this. I was born in Kolkata, India, and although overall India is fairly religious, I was born in a very non-religious family, and I decided I'm an atheist at a very young age. I think at an age where I'm not even supposed to know what it's about, but it was some form of anti-authoritarianism. That I think I was like 3 or 4 or something. I believe in God. I don't know what you people do in these temples or something like that. And I've remained an atheist still, but I think I was a little hardcore in my atheism in the sense that I rejected all sorts of rituals and even things like yoga and meditation, and no one bothered me about it. Also, no one really taught me or showed me what meditation was really about when I was a kid. I had this idea of it being some sort of a woo-woo spiritual thing where you join your fingers like this and you sit down and like something happens. Nothing happens. I don't know. So but as I was growing up, I had philosophical / spiritual ideas about where did we come from and what happens after we die and stuff like that. But some of them, I realize now, were just, just imaginations, like not based on anything. And I realized more and more that I didn't have foundations for believing in these ideas based on anything rational. Especially as I started getting deeper and deeper into science, I abandoned all of these ideas. I abandoned the answers, but somehow the questions kept. I still had questions, and I still had curiosity. But I kind of abandoned these ideas and I was like, oh, science is the way to go and all of this spiritual stuff is just bullshit. But I think around 2 years back, I read this book called Waking Up, A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion by Sam Harris, who did his undergrad in philosophy and then a PhD in neuroscience. And then he spent a lot of his life in solitary retreats and real hardcore Eastern spiritual practices. He would go and, live in a cave for like months, just meditating and stuff like that. And then he wrote this book, but I feel that it was pretty well grounded in science while still preserving a healthy amount of curiosity, the kind of curiosity that I felt, except that it didn't go overboard and try to answer it with things that were irrational. But it was respectful towards the kinds of curiosity that might give birth to religion or spirituality. So I connected to this book in some way because, I was curious, and now I realize that I don't really have to shove these curiosities under the rug because there are other scientists who are curious like me as well, and they haven't necessarily had to resort to traditional answers that are non-scientific. Actually, Stefan here, we were in the same book club, and I tried to get everyone to read the book, and people had different responses to it. Sam Harris these days is mostly known as this public talking head on TV or whatever, and he has a lot of views on things like politics and Islam and stuff that I don't really care about too much. This is the only book that I've read of him, and I didn't know anything about him before, so it didn't color my opinion. Like the stuff that other people may know about him, I didn't know, so it didn't color my opinion of him. So I was able to absorb this book from a fairly neutral vantage point. And I noticed that when I recommend this book to other people, the problem is a lot of people already know about Sam Harris and know about some of his more controversial views on other kinds of stuff. And so it doesn't filter through. So, that's nothing I can do about it. I do want to read you, since I'm making such a big deal of this book, I do want to read you, not read you, but play to you a reading of the first chapter of Waking Up. And this is a reading by Sam Harris himself. Let me see if this is working. Just to give you a hint of the kinds of things that he talked about that excited my curiosity.
A few years after my first painful encounter with solitude, in the winter of 1987, I took the drug 3,4-methylene dioxy N-methylamphetamine, MDMA, commonly known as ecstasy, and my sense of the human mind's potential shifted profoundly. Although MDMA would become ubiquitous at dance clubs and raves in the 1990s, at that time I didn't know anyone of my generation who had tried it. One evening, a few months before my 20th birthday, a close friend and I decided to take the drug. The setting of our experiment bore little resemblance to the conditions of Dionysian abandon under which MDMA is now often consumed. We were alone in a house, seated across from each other on opposite ends of a couch, and engaged in quiet conversation as the chemical worked its way into our heads. Unlike other drugs with which we were by then familiar, marijuana and alcohol, MDMA produced no feeling of distortion in our senses. Our minds seemed completely clear. In the midst of this ordinariness, however, I was suddenly struck by the knowledge that I loved my friend. This shouldn't have surprised me. He was, after all, one of my best friends. However, at that age, I was not in the habit of dwelling on how much I loved the men in my life. Now I could feel that I loved him, and this feeling had ethical implications that suddenly seemed as profound as they now seem pedestrian on the page. I wanted him to be happy. That conviction came crashing down with such force that something seemed to give way inside me. In fact, the insight appeared to restructure my mind. My capacity for envy, for instance, the sense of being diminished by the happiness or success of another person, seemed like a symptom of mental illness that had vanished without a trace. I could no more have felt envy at that moment than I could have wanted to poke out my own eyes. What did I care if my friend was better looking or a better athlete than I was? If I could have bestowed these gifts on him, I would have. Truly wanting him to be happy made his happiness my own. A certain euphoria was creeping into these reflections, perhaps, but the general feeling remained one of absolute sobriety and of moral and emotional clarity unlike any I had ever known. It would not be too strong to say that I felt sane for the first time in my life, and yet the change in my consciousness seemed entirely straightforward. I was simply talking to my friend about what I don't recall, and I realized that I had ceased to be concerned about myself. I was no longer anxious, self-critical, guarded by irony, in competition, avoiding embarrassment, ruminating about the past and future, or making any other gesture of thought or attention that separated me from him. I was no longer watching myself through another person's eyes. And then came the insight that irrevocably transformed my sense of how good human life could be. I was feeling boundless love for one of my best friends, and I suddenly realized that if a stranger had walked through the door at that moment, he or she would have been fully included in this love. Love was at bottom impersonal, and deeper than any personal history could justify. Indeed, a transactional form of love, I love you because, now made no sense at all. The interesting thing about this final shift in perspective was that it was not driven by any change in the way I felt. I was not overwhelmed by a new feeling of love. The insight had more the character of a geometric proof. It was as if, having glimpsed the properties of one set of parallel lines, I suddenly understood what must be common to them all. The moment I could find a voice with which to speak, I discovered that this epiphany about the universality of love could be readily communicated. My friend got the point at once. All I had to do was ask him how he would feel in the presence of a total stranger at that moment, and the same door opened in his mind. It was simply obvious that love, compassion, and joy in the joy of others extended without limit. The experience was not of love growing, but of its being no longer obscured. Love was, as advertised by mystics and crackpots through the ages, a state of being. How had we not seen this before? And how could we overlook it ever again?
So, the whole book is filled with a lot of stuff that I thought made a lot of sense. I didn't have to believe in anything in order to resonate with that. And so, sometime after reading this book, which also had basic instructions for meditation, I started meditating. Hey, okay, third and fourth people. So they went to the retreat with me as well. I started meditating, but it was sort of irregular. I would try. I was very ambitious at first. I started meditating an hour a day, and then whittled it down to a half hour, and then I don't know, I couldn't maintain that either, so I guess I went down to 5 minutes or so. But then I wasn't being regular, and I started talking to some of my friends who have been to meditation retreats, and a couple of them had been to the particular one that I eventually went to, and the thought of a 10-day silent meditation retreat was intimidating to me. But they told me that I would survive. They said, yeah, it's not going to be a joyride, but you're probably going to survive. So at a certain point, I decided the only way, I kept thinking, like, what's going to happen if I go? And I realized that the only way to have an answer is to actually go and find out. And the other thing that I should mention is that it's a free retreat. They don't actually, so you stay there and you eat and you live there, and it's all free. And they don't let you even donate anything until you finish the retreat. And even then, it's a donation, it's voluntary. So at a certain point of time, I started gearing up for the retreat. I signed up for it. And Rustam, my friend here, he said that, so we kind of decided together that there was one particular retreat that we would both go to. He would go and serve. He had been to the retreat before. But there's a group of people who have to actually serve and volunteer in order for other people to participate. So he would go and serve, and I would go as a participant. And at that time, I was getting kind of excited about this meditation idea. And I even thought to myself that once I'm done with my PhD, I'm taking at least one gap year, just going off to a monastery and just meditating and finding out what's in there, whatever. That's like the ultimate treasure trove of information is right here. If only I pay attention and everything. Okay, so this is the setting for my embarkment on the retreat. So when I was signing up, I read some information on the website, and so I'll read to you a little bit from what the website says. So this center is called the Southwest Vipassana Meditation Center. Vipassana is a form of meditation. And it's in Kaufman, Texas, not a place that any of you have heard of unless you've actually been to the retreat. It's in the middle of nowhere, which is itself in the middle of nowhere. And it's just, you won't find it. Anyway, so just to give you an idea of what this center is about, what the kind of meditation is about, this is from their website. And I don't subscribe to everything that they're saying here, but just to give you an idea of what they claim it to be. Vipassana is one of India's most ancient meditation techniques. Long lost to humanity, it was rediscovered by Gautama the Buddha more than 2,500 years ago. The word Vipassana means seeing things as they really are. It is a process of self-purification by self-observation. One begins by observing the natural breath to concentrate the mind. With a sharpened awareness, one proceeds to observe the changing nature of body and mind and experiences the universal truths of impermanence, suffering, and egolessness. This truth realization by direct experience is the process of purification. The entire path, called Dhamma, is a universal remedy for universal problems and has nothing to do with any organized religion or sectarianism. For this reason, it can be freely practiced by everyone at any time, in any place, without conflict due to race, community, or religion, and will prove equally beneficial to one and all. Although Vipassana was developed as a technique by the Buddha, its practice is not limited to Buddhists. There is absolutely no question of conversion. The technique works on the simple basis that all human beings share the same problems, and a technique which can eradicate these problems will have a universal application. People from many religious denominations have experienced the benefits of Vipassana meditation and have found no conflict with their profession of faith. During the course, it is absolutely essential that all forms of prayer, worship, or religious ceremony, fasting, burning incense, counting beads, reciting mantras, singing and dancing, etc., be discontinued. All other meditation techniques and healing or spiritual practices should also be suspended. This is not to condemn any other technique or practice, but to give a fair trial to the technique of Vipassana in its purity. What Vipassana is not. It is not a rite or ritual based on blind faith. It is neither an intellectual nor a philosophical entertainment. It is not a rest cure, a holiday, or an opportunity for socializing. It is not an escape from the trials and tribulations of everyday life. What Vipassana is, it is a technique that will eradicate suffering. It is a method of mental purification which allows one to face life's tensions and problems in a calm, balanced way. It is an art of living that one can use to make positive contributions to society. So I signed up for this retreat, and when it came close to the day that the retreat was supposed to start, what happened is Rustam's car broke down, and we were supposed to drive there with his car. And it came to the point where Rustam said, I'll probably not be able to go. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is my first 10-day silent meditation retreat out in the middle of nowhere. And I was kind of banking on Rustam to come with me. Although he wouldn't be able to talk, but just the idea that someone that you know is there. And so I felt a sense of risk. But I think I'm kind of drawn to risks. So at that point of time, I was like, yeah, it's okay, I guess. Let's see. It just kind of puts an element of adventure. So I went on a message board for organizing ride shares, carpools. And I found a guy who responded. But then the next year, Rustam's car was fixed. And the guy who responded actually said, oh, okay, your car's fixed. Well, can I jump on board with you guys? So his name was Paul, and we went to pick it up. It was a little bit out of the way, but it was kind of interesting. He lives in this farm, I guess. He lives in an RV and just grows stuff like vegetables and stuff. And he built this martial art dojo in the middle of the forest. And he just lives in an RV. There's a bunch of dogs and chickens. And so, okay, so this is where the hippies have retreated. So that was interesting. We picked him up, and then we went to the place. So I want to give you a general description of the location. It's just farmland. It's just Texas farmland, and the grounds opposite the Vipassana Center. In fact, like they had like Trump posters and stuff, and but there was this sign that said Vipassana, and you go in there and it's like a block of land and just sparse houses here and there, like an office, a kitchen, meditation hall, and then living quarters. I have some pictures here just to give you a sense. So yeah, I mean, these are pictures that I found on the internet. I didn't take any photos there, but as you can see, it's mostly, so yeah, I mean, it's just mostly just empty fields and then just a couple of houses scattered around. That's the pagoda where some people meditate, but in general, there's another meditation hall where most of the people meditate most of the time. So yeah, that's what the surroundings are like. And then, so on the first day, we got to talk to some people before the vow of noble silence starts. Most of the people, okay, so what kind of people were there? I was a little concerned that there would be a lot of woo-woo kinds of people that, and they would really turn me off from the whole thing and I would regret the whole decision. But a lot of people, so there were, okay, a lot of them were white, some of them were Asian, a lot of them were Indian, because I guess this technique traditionally has connections with India and the East. But a lot of people there were kind of just my age, like urban, pretty well educated, intelligent people. Like the first day I struck up a conversation with Ben and he had read Sam Harris and he listened to the podcast on the way. I was like, well, okay, all right, so I'm not entirely fish out of the water here. So that was interesting. I met another guy called James T.W. who created this thing called Poke Draw. And it's this thing where you go on this website and you get like 30 seconds to draw a Pokemon. And it became viral and it just like spread all around the world. And he had a donation button on the page, but he got no money out of it, but he became pretty famous. So he was there. But at the same time, I think there were some people there with weird beliefs, like Paul, who we picked up on the way back. He was talking about how someone once hooked a lie detector to a tree, and then the trees could tell, like listening to the lie detector, you could tell that the trees knew what was true and not, like if you threatened it, like I'm going to burn you down, but you didn't really mean to, then the lie detector wouldn't respond. But I mean, you can't hook a lie detector up to a tree because it responds skin conductances and it has to do with sweating. So, but anyway, so I'm saying that there's a wide mix of people with different backgrounds that come to a retreat like this. So let's see. This is going to be like a talk-heavy talk, not a slide-heavy talk. Okay, so a general description of the course. You sign in, you turn in all of your technology. If you have any religious objects, you turn those in. You cannot keep any books, any writing material, no phones or anything like that. And then on the first day, I think it's on the first day that the vow of silence starts, right? Okay, and then the whole course, for the whole duration of the course, women and men are separate to reduce distraction. Yes. So we had separate living quarters, we had separate kitchens, and in the meditation hall, the men sat on the left, and the women sat on the right. And then the room in which I lodged was just fairly simple. It just had a bed and a shelf and an alarm clock and a stool, and that was it. And I just brought my clothes, and that was it. That alarm clock is going to be etched in my memory for a long time. It was this, I thought I wouldn't have to see technology like that ever again, but like every morning as I woke up, it was just this, oh man, I'm still here. This alarm clock. But there's also something kind of, just something negative about just an alarm clock, but it's like very impersonal, like this old alarm clocks, they're like, never mind. Okay. So I didn't have a healthy relationship with that alarm clock. Anyway, so and then in the meditation hall, there were these cushions in a grid. The whole thing was very well organized. So they would, as you went into the meditation hall, they would assign you a seat by name, and that would be your location, your cushion for the entire duration, so that they would be able to like triangulate you. And so if you went missing, they would know, okay, so it's this person who's not here. And so, and there were additional cushions outside that people could use. And then around the area, so these are the living quarters, but then around the area there were some walking paths just through a little bit of woods, I guess, that you could take a walk around. But you are not allowed to run, jog, exercise, do yoga or any such thing. Just you can take a walk. And so this was the schedule for pretty much the entire duration of the course. So there's an actual person who walks around through the residential quarters, ringing a bell at 4 a.m. to wake you up. That wasn't enough for me, so I had to set the alarm. 4:30 to 6:30 a.m. meditate in the hall or in your room. The hall is the common meditation hall. In the beginning, at the start of the course, I actually used to go to the meditation hall at 4:30, but then I meditated in my room from 4:30 to 6:30. The clearest of minds. 6:30 to 8 breakfast, then 8 to 9 group meditation, then 9 to 11. Once again, you can either be in the meditation hall or you can be in your room. Lunch break. So the style of meditation that was being followed here was in the tradition of someone called S.N. Goenka, who actually passed away in 2013. But he was a Burmese Indian Vipassana teacher who taught many students in India and Burma, I guess, and then eventually he helped set up these Vipassana centers all around the world, and this is one of them. He's dead now, but there are assistant teachers there who essentially don't play a very active role during the whole meditation retreat, but if you have any questions, you can go up to them and ask. So from 12 to 1, you can go and ask questions to the assistant teacher. And then, once again, you can in the hall or in your room, group meditation in the hall, tea break, group meditation in the hall. And then this is where they would play recorded videos of S.N. Goenka that were recorded during an actual 10-day meditation retreat that he taught. So every evening we would have a discourse where he would kind of talk about general things or give a new set of instructions. And then, once again, group meditation. This is question time in the hall, and then, just go to sleep.
So you actually do talk to people?
That's the only opportunity to talk, is to ask questions to the teachers. There was one time that I asked a question. Actually, twice I asked 2 questions. And that was all I said during those 10 days, were those 2 questions. The silence wasn't the hard part. I'll come to what was the hard part. Okay, so the meditation method. It started with a breathing meditation, just very generally paying attention to the breath, and then paying attention to where you can feel the breath, like your nostrils and your upper lip, and then narrow it down to just the upper lip, and then eventually you start opening it up to an awareness of your entire body, what's going on with the body. And then towards the later part of the retreat, the group meditation sessions So this, and this, and they became so during these 4 sessions, you were encouraged not to change your posture. So these 1 hour sessions, you had to settle down in a certain posture and not change it. So that was kind of hard. And then on day 10, we did a different kind of like loving kindness meditation that was different from everything else that we were doing. And so during the evenings, we would have these discourses, and I just want to give you a little sample of what those were like. So this is an example of Goenka.
Understand, our misery is universal. The malady is universal. When someone generates negativity, anger, or hatred, or envy, passion, fear, ego, and negativity, one becomes tense, becomes miserable. This applies to everyone. When you generate anger, what label can you give to this anger? That now this anger which has arisen is a Christian anger, or this is a Jewish anger, a Hindu anger, or a Buddhist anger, or an American anger, or English anger, or a Russian anger. Anger is anger. And then,
so that was just an example of the evening discourses. So this was the general schedule for the entirety of the duration. And so during the first several days, as we were meditating in this hall, the first signs of difficulty that I had were physical. In January 2014, when I did the Austin full marathon, I kind of injured my left knee. And as I was sitting down to meditate, this pain in my left knee started to arise again, because I probably don't sit for extended periods of time with my leg folded. So then I had to go and ask for a backrest. But then in the next couple of days, the pain just subsided surprisingly. I guess my body just got used to my knee being folded, and I gave it back. However, as I looked around the room, because a lot of people are not used to sitting for long periods of time, they would go and get all these cushions from the extra stash of cushions and build like literally thrones for themselves. Like you could walk around the room and find thrones of all manner, and every hour they were being edited and slightly improved and architecturally just refabricated. So that was pretty interesting to see. But then as time went on, I guess the level, the degree of elaborateness in the throne started dwindling a little bit as people's bodies got more and more comfortable. I noticed that the thrones would become a bit more minimal, just like one cushion on top of another cushion, and that's it. And that's definitely something that I noticed with myself as well. That as time went on, my body just got kind of more used to sitting just on a cushion, and eventually I was just sitting on a cushion, and that was it. The other thing is, I don't know if you noticed, but there is no dinner anywhere here. There's breakfast and there's lunch, or there's tea. There's no dinner. There was no dinner during the whole 10-day retreat. Okay. So what people do, and I did, is eat a lot of food during lunch. Okay. So I was eating a lot of lunch, and then during tea break, I guess I would also just gorge on a lot of food. And then eventually what happened is, so you can tell that you're not spending a lot of energy during these 10 days. You're just sitting there, and maybe a couple times during the day you're out walking, just taking a walk. So you're eating all this food, and then you're not expending any energy. And I think partly this is a reason why when you're sitting down to meditate, your body is so agitated. There's all this metabolic activities going on. There's no way to expend it. So your mind is just everywhere. Let's get out and like run. I don't know, ride a car or something. So eventually, what happened is I started eating much less, and maybe this was a reason why it helped my body and my mind calm down a little bit. So yeah, okay. So this was the first several days. Before I went to the retreat, my friends who had gone to such a retreat had told me that the middle part would probably be the worst. So the first couple of days I was still pretty excited. And every evening during the discourse, we would usually get the instructions, the new instructions for meditating the next day, because they were slowly adding instructions or changing instructions. So on the evening of day 3, so on day 4, it said it was going to be Vipassana day, which is that you get the full-fledged instructions for Vipassana meditation. So I was expecting to get these instructions on the evening of day 3, because it would start Vipassana meditation on day 4. But on the evening of day 3, all that Goenka said in his recorded video was, okay, so far you are paying attention to the sensation of breath in the nostrils and the upper lip. Now focus just on the upper lip. I'm like, that's so boring. Yeah. And so I got pretty frustrated. I remember that that was probably the worst part of the retreat for me. Is at a certain point of time, I felt like I was wasting my time. Not that everyone was wasting my time, that this retreat was a waste of time, that I was wasting my time, that I wasn't getting anything out of this. But I remember that, so in the grounds, there was this wooden bench where people would sit just during the recess periods. And I was just sitting there, and I was feeling pretty wretched. It's like, man, there's like 6 more days to go, and I don't know what I'm doing here. Not 6, like it was 7 more days to go. And I looked down, and then something was engraved, something was scratched into the wooden bench. And I got pretty curious, and I just started looking at it from all angles. It was a little bit of writing, but it was hard to decipher what it was. But eventually, looking at it from all angles, I could tell what it was saying. I don't know if you can read it here, but I took my time deciphering this. What do you think this says?
I can't wait till day 10.
It says, I can't wait till day 10. And so when I read that, I first thought, does this mean that this person is having such a great time that, like on they can't wait for day 10, so like they can tell everyone? But I was like, no, then they would probably say, I can't wait for day 10. I can't wait till day 10 means something else, like they can't wait for this to be over. I can't wait till day 10 means nothing else. So I kind of stared at this for a little bit, and I thought, perhaps I'm not the only person who's having a hard time here. It's just that we're not talking to each other. So we impose these ideas on, like, we just keep feeling like, oh, everyone else is having such a great time and I'm not. But a person was obviously disturbed enough to etch this on the wooden bench. So there have been people who not only have they felt as challenged and frustrated as I'm feeling, some people have probably felt worse. I mean, I don't feel like, scratching this into, I'm just kind of complaining in my head. So when I saw that, somewhat surprisingly, that was my climb out of the depth of that valley. It's like, okay, so I think I can make it through. It's not just happening to me, it's happened to other people and will happen to other people. And I remember the Buddha, like, suffering is the one thing that's common to everyone. Like, okay, cool. So, yeah, I'm doing things according to the program here. I'm suffering right on schedule. So, so this is fine. This is good.
How did you get the photo?
Oh, this was on day 10 after we got our phones back. I knew I would give a talk at some point. So I went back and took that picture. Yeah. So, so on day 4, we were given the Vipassana instructions. which was essentially the instructions to open up the awareness from just the sensation of the breath to anything that's happening all over the body. So just a sensation of the entire body. And I had known of this previously as body scanning meditation. Also, on the day that we got these instructions, it was actually my birthday, but I didn't remember. I didn't realize it was my birthday until day 8, which was 4 days later. And then I was like, on day 8, I was like, wait, wasn't my birthday supposed to be during the retreat? What date is it? What's I'm like, oh, it's 4 days past my birthday. I went 4 days without even realizing it. It's just that you're so far removed from your regular everyday life, and people don't know you, and you're not talking, you don't wake up to the date and time and stuff like that, that it's very easy to forget stuff like this. It's a bit artificial, and it puts you in a very artificial space-time. So this I saw this on day 3, I guess. Around day 6-ish, things started actually getting a lot better. The first really unambiguous effects I felt was that physically I was becoming a lot more comfortable with sitting down for extended periods of time. I told you partly it's because I think I started eating less, but also I think if you just your body just gets used to sitting in a certain posture, it will eventually find it more natural, and you won't have all these aches and pains in your back anymore. And if physically you're feeling like you can sit for longer periods of time, it's kind of inextricably connected with how you feel mentally. And the feedback process goes the other way as well. Even if physically you're very comfortable, but you're mentally agitated, it will eventually translate into some form of physical discomfort. And I think that was one reason why they told us that towards the later part, that during this group meditation sits of 1 hour, don't change your posture. And I think that was a good way for me to investigate that a lot of things that appear as physical discomforts are actually mental discomforts. And if you don't react to it, if you somehow resist the urge to react to it and just wait, you can see interesting things happen. Like you can see that urge go away. So what you felt eventually was an inevitable need to change your posture because of something that your body is telling you to do, just passes and you're fine. And so that's kind of interesting, because if you think about it, we are probably reacting to such impulses all the time without waiting to see what happens if you don't do anything. Sometimes responding to certain kinds of impulses is actually good. It's good for you, but at other times it's probably not. For me, for example, I know that a lot of the things that I do, most of the things I do, is to stave off boredom. And sometimes it leads to creative stuff. A lot of the times it leads to stuff that's not really good for me. Like I would go and eat something because I'm bored. That's not a good reason to eat something. I'm working at my desk and I feel bored and I switch to a different task. And then I get bored with that after 5 minutes, switch to the first task again. I mean, that's not very good. So a lot of the times, I think if you don't entertain it mentally, it will result in at least for me, I feel like physically like getting up and doing something. And then I make up an excuse. I'm like, oh, there's this bit of paper that I needed to get from this department for something that will happen 7 years into the future. And I'll like get up and do that, and like take like a whole hour and go to the other end of campus. It's like I'm fooling myself, giving myself the weakest of reasons to get up. But it wasn't a physical need. It was like a mental need that translated into physical need. And it's just, yeah, I mean, but all I'm saying is the kinds of things that you start to notice are just amplified versions of what everyone goes through every day. It's just that we don't really pay attention. We don't wait for, we just react too quickly, and then that puts us in a different mode where we are dealing with new things. But we didn't wait long enough for the first impulse to get conspicuous enough for us to attend to it. Like really, okay, so this is the impulse. So around day 6-ish and onwards, I realized that I could just sit still for a whole hour. I could just pick a posture and just sit without moving for a whole hour. And I could do this 4 times a day. And I didn't have any pain. Sometimes, my leg would entirely fall asleep by the end. And I wouldn't be able to stand up. I was like, yeah, it's okay, all right, I'll just wait it out a little bit. But the newness of it was pretty exciting. I was like, man, I didn't know I could do this. It was kind of like the first time I ran a marathon. I didn't know that I could do it. So that was kind of exhilarating. But it was also pretty draining and exhausting because that's the physical part. Mentally, it was a lot harder. I realized that I had a very, very, very restless mind. I don't know, I guess many other people realized it as well. But it was very agitated. So the mental image I had was of a well-oiled and strong sumo wrestler, and I was trying to pin him down. He just keeps slipping. And the instructions are simple, just pay attention to the breath or pay attention to the body. But I mean, if you start doing it, you'll notice you can't do it for 30 seconds straight. It's impossible. Your mind has just been thrice around the world by that time, that you're just supposed to focus on the breath. But if you're supposed to be doing it for 10 days, you just see so many repeated examples of your mind just everywhere that it can get kind of frustrating. For me, it got kind of frustrating, but I guess to some extent I expected it. I knew that it was going to be that way to some extent. But eventually what happens is, as you keep returning your attention again and again, and it's important to do it kindly. Like if you start being unkind to yourself, like, oh, you're a piece of shit, you can't do anything, you can't even like hold your attention on the breath, that's not going to go anywhere. You just have to kind of accept that this is what your mind is like. If you keep doing it, what I saw was that towards the end of the retreat, I noticed, so once, I'll just give you an example. I told you that there were these paths you could walk around in. So, and there were some wooden benches located at different points in this path, and you could go and sit. I remember once just going and sitting on a wooden bench, and I just stared out at a field. There was nothing going on, maybe a couple of cows, but that's it, just to feel the adjacent field. And I just stared at that for like a half hour or so. And I was like, man, I don't think I could have done this before. Just the simple act of sitting down and looking at a field where nothing's going on and feeling, okay, I don't think I'm wasting my time or I need to be anywhere else. That was pretty new. I don't think I could have done that if I hadn't gone to the retreat. And during the time that I'm like watching, like just looking out at this field, I could tell that my mind was still restless. Like it still wanted me to do something else. But it was a lower amplitude overall. Like it wasn't as, it was not an overwhelming feeling of restlessness. I was aware that it was restless, but it wasn't enough to get me to get up and do something. Also, as I sat there, I realized that this voice that's telling me that, this is boring, get up and do something else, was completely futile. What am I going to do? There is nothing that I can do. I can possibly go back to my room and then do what? I'm going to sit there for 5 minutes until the same voice tells me this is boring and then come back here again. Like the whole futility of this voice started to become very clear to me. And normally the futility of what it says is obscured by the fact that you can make up excuses and there are many other sources of distraction. So it feels like you're doing something useful when you constantly respond to this voice by ceasing to do the thing that you're doing and starting something else or entertaining a new distraction. But over there, the futility of this voice started to become very clear to me, because although I knew that there was nothing to do, the fact that the voice kept saying that means that the voice doesn't care about the use of what it is suggesting you to do. All that the voice cares about is to not be here, not be doing this, no matter what it is. If it just kind of gets used to it for a little bit, it will not. And you can, I think there's a hedonic treadmill here. Like you can get to the point where even things that really arrested your attention before now start to bore you more and more often. I don't know, personally it has happened to me. Like when I was growing up, I would find a new band or a new album and I would be immersed in that album, just playing it again and again. But now the music of the whole world is at my fingertips, and I'm bored like every 30 seconds. Like I find a new band and listen to 3 songs, like, no, this is not good. What's the next one? And so that, I think, is just this, the mind has this really wide range of adjusting itself, and you can use it for good, or it can use you. So it just kind of, I think a retreat like this, if nothing else, it brings you in hard contact with this voice in the head that's always complaining. And so there are 2 ways to go about it. Either you always satisfy the voice, but that's hard. If you have a lot of money, it's not very hard. But if you don't have a lot of money, even if you have a lot of money, it can be hard. But if you run out of resources to appease this voice, the other thing is to just sit down and listen to the voice and see where that conversation goes. But it can be a very unpleasant conversation. I remember writing this down, that the futility of the restless mind always wanting to be elsewhere became very clear to me. Also, I remember,
So does that help you now to do your work? Do you go on Reddit less often? Yeah. Can you concentrate on a task for a longer time?
It requires, what I would say is it requires continued practice. This is not a theory where someone tells you and you understand. It's about practice. It's about habits of the mind. And even if for a particular period of time you realize that the mind works in a certain way, if you drop the practice, then that insight is not going to help you. You may remember that I realized that, but it's not going to help you in a day-to-day life. So in many ways, I kind of equate meditation with physical exercise. Like, people can tell you, and you can go to a gym and do a crash course and figure out, oh, if I do this, this happens. Then if you stop doing it, it's just going to return to what it does. And so these days, I think, I'm very susceptible to urges like this all the time. And I'm trying to progressively address it. I talked to a friend of mine, actually, who told me, okay, don't try to discipline your whole day like this. Just try to work 5 minutes more than your mind will let you. So I was like, okay, I'll try that. But if nothing else, I'm very aware of it. I think earlier I may not have told you that I have this tendency because it wasn't clear to me. Plus I would have like self-defense strategies, like, no, I'm like, I'm better than that. But I'm not. It's just I'm so susceptible to these things that the first place to start is to acknowledge. So even as I'm listening to this voice and running errands that I don't need to, I know that I'm doing that now. So hopefully hopefully that goes somewhere. So, and so, but I remember that, I remember sensing an elevated and a more stable background level of calm as I sat on the bench. But I do remember that I felt like I was a very brief visitor there. I realized that I had to do a lot of meditation to gain this calmness that felt very fragile, and that I had to keep doing meditation to sustain this. And that felt a little bit disappointing, but I don't think the actual story is quite as bad as that. Since the retreat, I have maintained a daily practice of meditation, just 15 minutes a day. And although it doesn't solve this problem entirely, it still goes a long way towards addressing it. I think my eating habits are better. Shortly after I finished the meditation retreat, I started going to the gym every day, and it stopped becoming a chore. It's like, okay, so there can be compounding effects. So for some habits, there's a little bit of a threshold, and once you cross it, it actually becomes an easier thing to do. And so at the very end of the retreat, I guess on days 9 and 10, there was this pagoda where there were individual solitary cells, just dark cells where you could go and meditate. And I did that. The only problem is that the way that the pagoda is constructed, it's very noisy. Like if someone closes the door very far, it just echoes all around the pagoda. So I think it was kind of defeating the purpose of solitary meditation cell, because you could hear people everywhere. But I remember that during a couple of those sits, my mind was very restless, and I realized that the only way for me to make progress was really address this head on. So I kept trying to return my attention to the breath like every couple seconds or so. I wouldn't let the thoughts just like take hold for more than a couple seconds. And it was draining. Like I wasn't doing anything physical, but by the end of such a sit, like a 1 hour sit, I would be mentally exhausted. But I would also feel very proud of it. So, yeah. But, overall, I had to wrestle a lot with the restlessness of my mind. And because of this reason, I realized that I would not be a good fit for, just going off to a monastery for a year and becoming a monk. Just my mind is just too restless. But I didn't feel any guilt associated with that. It was important for me to realize this. And to some extent, I feel like if you just live in a monastery for a long time, you have to suppress your levels of curiosity about the external world. And I wasn't really prepared to do that, and I felt okay with it. So before going to the retreat, I felt like it would solidify my intention to go and take a year off. It did the exact opposite, but I'm glad anyway. There were a couple of things about the retreat that I didn't like. So for example, during the evening discourses, there were some unscientific things that S.N. Goenka said. Like, for example, he referred to the invention of the bubble chamber. It's a physics apparatus. And he said that that bubble chamber shows that all matter, including the body, is made of wavelets and bubbles. So every particle of body can be sensed at every moment as this tide of bubbles by the mind. But when they went and interviewed the scientist who came up with the bubble chamber, it turned out that he was a very depressed person, and that was supposed to be surprising because he came up with this theory that should tell him that, everything is just rising and passing away, but it's because he never really applied it to his daily life. I was like, no, that kind of sounds phony. The whole thing is phony. And he talked about the reincarnation stuff, which is standard Buddhist belief. Something about a samkhara that I didn't know before, but it's kind of like bad karma. When you're coming to the end of this life, what happens is all of your accumulated sankharas, which are all the negativities that you produced and generated, kind of arise and give birth to a new mind somewhere else, and that's your next life. And so once you run out of all sankharas, like you do something that gets rid of all your current as well as your past stock of sankharas, a new mind will not be born, and it will be liberated, and that's nirvana. I was like, the rest of Vipassana is about real first-person experience, and I don't see any evidence for any of this stuff, so this is like the polar opposite of the rest of the philosophy. But you don't have to buy into this. It's just that I kind of found it hard to sit through all of this stuff, and to be honest, that kind of eroded to some extent the degree of respect that I was feeling for the institution and the person, but it doesn't matter. When they ask you to meditate, you can close your eyes and it's just you do what you do. No one can tell you what to do. And I remember that during the retreat, there were several creative ways, because I was always attacked so much by boredom. There were some creative ways that I figured out how to stave off boredom. One, I had a razor. If you try to balance your razor on your fingertip, that can entertain you for a long time. And I figured out that although a razor has this little head, it actually helps because it increases the moment of inertia. Never mind. But okay, so I took body wash, and I did something that I the last time I'd done this, I was a kid. You shake the body wash, and the bubbles start rising, and the big bubbles rise first, and the smaller bubbles are slower. You just watch it for a long time. Whoa, this is so cool. Okay, shower. I took a lot of showers. I was the cleanest I've ever been. Okay, and this last one, I systematically tried to deprive myself of oxygen. Just to see. So I took an umbrella, I put a blanket on top of that, and I wedged myself up on my bed against the corner like this, and I put the umbrella and everything okay, no oxygen, let's just observe what happens now. This is how restless my mind is. Okay, it's not a good thing. I don't know, it will kill me someday. So, but there wasn't enough time. So it was like 1 hour, and then we had to go meditate again, and I couldn't deprive myself of oxygen enough. So, well, that experiment aborted there. People watching. You can't talk to these people, so you project all sorts of personalities on them. And you get like a little bit of information, you build a whole story out of it. So, by the way, some of the people dropped. Before you sign up for the retreat, they really make sure in bold letters, like, you are really committing to this. Don't cancel. You can't cancel. When you go there, they make you sign a piece of paper saying you can't leave. But you can leave, but they really encourage you to not leave. Like, if you feel like leaving, don't start. But some people dropped anyway. Like, a certain day, I would go to the meditation hall, and suddenly, like, a guy would be missing and never turn up. So yeah, some people dropped. I remember one of these people who dropped. He was in the same like small group as me that we would go in and ask the teacher questions. And he once asked something about. Some vegetarians incorporate egg into their diets. Is that okay? And the assistant teacher was like, you don't have to be vegetarian to do Vipassana. So anyway, so a lot of people have a lot of questions that had nothing to do with meditation. There was a guy in the kitchen who would take the soy milk and just shake it for 5 minutes. Shake it vigorously for 5 minutes. And I remember, like, I was just sitting there like, what a dick. Just shaking the soy milk. You shake the soy milk and then pour it. And one time I went right after him, and then I poured the soy milk and it was so frothy. And just, it's like, whoa. And the next day I was the one. And I talked to him at the end of the retreat. I'm like, man, your soy milk thing, it's opened my life up to so many opportunities. I'm going to shake my soy milk all the time. This guy had a friend, and they were communicating through gestures the whole retreat. And then one time when I was taking a walk, I saw them both up on a tree, and they were just laughing and talking to each other. I was like, okay, whatever, they're having fun. But I didn't tell on them or anything. But there was a guy who burped at regular intervals during the meditation. Like you could tell, like, okay, so it's like a burp every 10 minutes, so like 6 burps is a meditation sitting. It's very regular. Okay. There was another guy who had a t-shirt that on the back it said Naropa CPBP Competitive Meditation Team.
Oh, yeah.
And on the front it said, do you even sit, bro? And for some time I thought this was a sarcastic thing. But then, like your mind is just sitting there complaining about stuff. So it's just, yeah, that guy is such a douchebag. What does he think? Like a competitive meditation team? And then I just projected this picture of this, he just thinks he's so much better than everyone. And then on day 10, I went up to him like, what's that t-shirt? And he said, yeah, it was a gag that some of my friends put together. I was like, oh, I see, okay. And he was just the nicest of people. It's like, man, like, your mind just needs fodder. And then, Gopi, who's sitting there in the back, for some reason I thought she was Italian. And then I met her later at the Blanton Museum, and she turned out to be Indian. Well, so you just build these stories out of nothing about other people because you can't talk. There were a lot of animals around that area. Someone found a scorpion on their meditation mat. One thing that was true was that there were chiggers. I didn't know what chiggers are, but there were signs posted saying, there were chiggers outside. Like, don't go among the bushes and stuff. And, I used to take walks. And then at night, what would happen is, like, my skin would itch everywhere. Like this, like, red spots. And nighttime me would decide, okay, no more walks in the woods. Daytime me would decide, no, I need to take a walk. This is boring. So I would go. Nighttime me would like, oh my God, no more walks. Okay. So these chiggers, actually, later on I reasoned that the kinds of effects that they have on your body have a lot to do with the kind of meditation that we're number one, their bites immediately bring you to an awareness of the body. So this is part of what the point of the meditation was. Also, you scratch these bites because of craving, but simultaneous with the pleasure arises new pain. And so you realize that pleasure and pain are like two sides of the same coin. So it was such a clear demonstration. Also, if you refrain from scratching, you see that the urge to scratch kind of passes away after a while. So so they're a hands-on Buddhism tool. I made this picture. there's a mascot of Buddhism. Okay, they may have been planted there. Okay, so immediately after coming back, this is where I'll end. Immediately after coming back on the first day, because you're back in your regular life, the contrast is very stark. During the time in the meditation retreat, it's an artificial place, and you don't really get to gauge the changes. But once I was back in Austin, you can see much more clearly the differences in the ways that you think or act, you feel. But I kind of knew that these effects were short-lived and would go away. So I made sure to write them down on the day that I came. So I'll read to you verbatim what I wrote down on the day that I came. These were bullet points I wrote down in my phone. First point is clearest, least ambiguous effect. General increase in calmness and happiness. Thought about it clearly, not contingent on circumstances. Okay, so point number 2. Increase in attention towards mundane things. Increase in appreciation of regular things. For example, took a walk to Eastwoods Park, which is near my house. It's raining and pretty outside, but even so had a much greater arresting appreciation for the natural beauty and can pay more relaxed, intent attention to things. Increased empathy with people. For example, I took a haircut on the day I came back, and I remember that I spoke to the lady who gave me the haircut in an exceptionally cheerful and warm way. I spoke to my landlord in a much more compassionate, empathetic, feeling way, letting him speak and finish his sentences, something that I'm not very good at. And I remember saying fewer things that were actually closer to what I was feeling, and there was much less fluff. And when he spoke about my landlady's illness, I could more clearly and immediately identify the pain that I felt as being sympathetic sadness. Like, it was just much more clear to understand what was going on. Haven't tested it too explicitly yet, but know that there will be less tendency of aversive impulses, such as shying away from unpleasant tasks. Will probably be more productive. I don't have any moderately unpleasant research work to do today, so can't tell for sure. So that's the end of my notes there. And that is all I have to say about my retreat. But I have a couple people here. There's Benam, Angela, right? I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Terrence. Yeah, Terrence and Gopi and Rustam, who also went to the retreat. So feel free to talk to them about their experiences. But thanks a lot for being here and listening to me. Well, the first was just about my posture. I told him that my knee was paining, and so he asked me to get a backrest. The second question I had was a theoretical one about the concept of the self that didn't have much to do with the meditation, but I was just kind of theoretically curious, and he didn't give a very satisfactory answer to it. And now in retrospect, I see why he didn't, because the kind of question that I asked was not really in line with the tradition that they follow, or the way I asked that question was, but it's not very important to the practice itself. Something about the feeling of the self or something like that. But that would require a whole other introduction to explain that question. Yeah.
Did the teachers also meditate with you?
Yeah.
Wow. So they
Well, some of the times they did. During some other sessions, after we started the meditation, I noticed that they would leave. Like they would get up their chairs and leave. But you have to give them a break. They're doing this all the time, year round. So yeah. Wow. But a lot of the times they would just sit and meditate with us. Yeah.
I would just like to say that I have shared the experience of having an urge, for example, to go on Reddit. And I guess where the real goal is to be more productive, do something that you actually want to do.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want to be spending my time on Reddit or whatever.
Yeah.
And I had the exact same sort of you have the urge, it's very strong, and you try to ignore it. And if you manage for a very long time to suppress it, then it will eventually go away. This works for chocolate ice cream, Reddit, etc. So it's cool that I got someone else who's had the same. You described it pretty much exactly.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
I do want to say you don't suppress it, right? You just observe it.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, totally. That's
you don't really suppress it.
Yeah. Definitely from the meditative sort.
It's a midway. It's kind of midway between suppressing it and yielding to it. You observe it in its fullness, but you don't react. You don't do what it's asking you to do, but you really feel what it's like. A lot of the times during those sits, as I felt restless, I tried to observe what that feeling of restlessness was like. Like, does it feel like heat coming up my chest, or what is it? So,
I have crude thoughts about it.
And I think it's fine to go on Reddit. It's just that, for example, on the day that I was back, if I went on YouTube or something like that, I feel like I would be actually paying more attention. But I mean, you can read, you can watch stuff, and it can educate you. But when it's controlling you in a certain way, and it's not really our fault. Like, I listened to a podcast on the Sam Harris podcast where he had this person on, and he used to work for Silicon Valley. His name is Tristan Harris. And now he has started this foundation called Time Well Spent because he wasn't a big fan of what people in Silicon Valley were doing or what their motivations were for creating these apps. Essentially, there's this attention economy, and all these people who are creating these apps want to hog as much of the user's attention as possible. So it's not a coincidence that these apps end up being things that are, that really kind of arrest your attention. They're being designed to do that. So it's not entirely our fault, but it's still, at the end of the day, until policies are implemented, it's our responsibility to decide what we do with our time. So, all said and done, I'm still gonna watch YouTube. Well, I have to do something about it. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you've done any social media purges. Like, when I first got into it over the summer, into meditation, I went through my YouTube subscriptions and Instagram follows, and I'm just I may enjoy watching that video, but ultimately unimportant, unsubscribe.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you did that.
I did some before, not after the retreat, but before I definitely did. I remember there was a point of time where I realized that this Facebook scrolling thing was really literally like a drug addiction. It was giving me the same, this is what addiction is like. And so I deactivated my Facebook for several months. And so if you deactivate, nothing's happening. So there's no reason to go back to Facebook. There's just nothing happening. And so, but I reactivated it eventually because people create events on Facebook. That's really the only reason that it's useful. But I noticed that after I went back to Facebook, I didn't have this impulse to scroll or post or stuff like that. But over time, that urge slowly came back to the point where I recently deactivated and then reactivated again to share this event. It's just this, I don't know what to do about it. After the meditation, I thought that I would be able to set aside a couple minutes a day for Facebook just to see if there's an event going on and not check it the rest of the day. That was a disappointment. Yeah.
And when they created the endless video stream
Oh, yeah.
on the app,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they all want to one-up each other. Like YouTube is like, okay, now we are going to start automatically playing the next video unless you cancel it. So I remember, like, we have all been the witness of the evolving forms of this technology. So I remember back when, at the end of a YouTube video, you didn't even get suggestions. And now it will automatically play the next suggestion. Like, it doesn't care. It's like a slot machine. Yeah. Actually, the guy, Tristan Harris, the Silicon Valley guy, said that the inspiration for the Infinite Scroll was the slot machine. Yeah.
You just pay with your life.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, I remember a while back I went to Congress Bridge to see the bats, and there was this little girl sitting on the grass in front of me, and as the bats came out, she was just on her phone. I was like, man, this technology can be dangerous. I don't know. I mean, this is like thousands of bats coming out of the bridge, and there's like a little animated thing like shooting something into the next valley, and you're like poking at it with your finger.
Or like you go to a concert, right? People pay money and they're like this the
Yeah.
whole time. It's like you're not gonna watch the concert, but you're gonna go home later and watch the video that you filmed at the concert.
They are not going to watch it.
And they're not.
They're not going to watch it. It's about
It's like shit quality.
it's about showing other people that you went to the concert. And these other people are not going to watch it either.
Like
They're just going to scroll.
Louis C.K. has that joke about people like filming their kids' ballet recitals. Like, the resolution on this photo is amazing. He's like, the resolution on the kid
Yeah.
is fucking great right now.
People did that during the solar eclipse too. They were the whole time they're just looking through their screen. I'm just like, you travel all that way watching in person.
Yeah.
I was in Berlin recently, and when I go into a club there, they actually put stickers on your phone's camera.
Oh.
So you pull your phone out, they kick you out.
Wow.
Yeah, before everyone leaves, I want to hear from everyone who participated in this.
Yeah.
One bullet point struck me as a little different from the rest when you were kind of listing advantages. A lot of it is about self-control and self-awareness, but then there was that empathy bullet point,
Yeah.
which I think that really recommends the practice, at least to me, and I just want to know how big of a part that played in everyone else's experience.
Like, did I experience an increase in empathy?
Yeah.
I mean, definitely not during the meditation itself because it's such an isolated experience. I think it's a heightened sensitivity that I had afterwards that kind of like maybe whereas before I felt much more capable of mediating what comes in and out emotionally after meditation. I'm just like, whoa! I went to a gas station on my way back. I had a 7-hour drive, and just feeling the people in the room, feeling like, the cashier and this and that, and everyone's in their their own headspace, their own grooves. Like someone's like, I gotta get this drink and this and that. It was definitely overwhelming, and it felt very immediate. So I think you could say it was an increase in empathy. Like it was definitely something that I felt viscerally. So maybe that kind of empathy, it's kind of contiguous.
I would agree that the heightened sense of awareness, at first it's towards yourself, and you're kind of developing empathy towards yourself and your own sensations, and it kind of naturally just stems towards other people immediately after. So yeah, definitely increased empathy, increased attention in general, so it's all kind of wrapped up in the same awareness naturally.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, and I also want to say that as you progress, your experiences change, and you more and more things happen. So in the beginning, it's just really hard to just keep your attention on your breath. Once you can do that, you can start doing other things, and more changes happen.
For me, it felt like since I was personally more relaxed, I had more room for empathizing with other people, and I didn't have to work or figure out a trick. It was all already there, just obscured by just noise. And if the noise goes away, it arises automatically. It was always there. So yeah, that's the way that I felt. I didn't have to engineer it. It was kind of fun. I was like, oh, I already have these skills. It's just that, you're behind this film of, I've got to do this and that.
So with that in mind, do you have any other suggestions for like getting rid of that sort of noise in your life, or to you is daily meditation a big one?
I think the attitude of wanting to get rid of it is a little problematic because that entails self-judgment, and that's more noise. So it's a little paradoxical. I think when you start meditating, you'll notice that it's filled with these things that are paradoxical in many ways. Like there's no straight way of motivating yourself or motivating some sort of change directly. Because if it was that easy and that straightforward, it would be straightforward. But it's just that these are just matters of psychology, and they're very subtle, and there's no way to force them. Like the forcing is a bit of the problem in itself. So if you decide that I don't want this noise in my head, that just adds more noise. It's just directed towards yourself, so it's more camouflaged. So kind of like what Angela was saying, that the empathy towards other people is just a subset of what is like a global empathy and all encompassing empathy. So you cannot love other people if you don't love yourself. That's something that, okay, so by the way, I played you this clip of Sam Harris taking ecstasy when he was 17 years old. I did it myself one time, and that's like a shortcut to this empathetic stage. And the first thing that you notice is that the unconditional, I think it's unconditional under the effects of the drug, and it includes yourself. And it has to include yourself, because otherwise you cannot trust, when you feel empathetic towards other people, you can't trust that it's coming from a good place if you're not feeling empathetic towards yourself. So in many ways, if you go on the other side of the argument, any sort of negativity that you imagine is being directed outside is also implicitly also directed inside, because you don't feel good when you feel that way. So I think there's no straightforward answer or suggestion. Like this, it's not a theory, like I said, it's a practice. And if you keep practicing, I think there are insights, but it's not very important to write them down and follow them. It's just it's like going to the gym, I think. And things will just become simpler over time. And there are people who are farther along this path to whom things are simple, and they could come and tell you all they know, but it won't make any difference because it's about practice. Yeah. So there are things I could tell you, but it won't make much difference. The only difference it will make is you'll try to implement them and it doesn't work, you'll just get more frustrated. So, yeah. But I mean, if you start with a short period of meditation every day, then that should be helpful. But I won't give you any guarantees on when you should start seeing changes. That sets up expectations, and that's a whole feedback cycle. Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you very much again for turning up. Thanks for visiting the Room of Lives. In the next episodes, I plan to interview Tim Lanning, who has been overseeing and helping to teach these 10-day silent retreats for many years. So see you next time.